Welcome back this week on 704 Unfiltered. We got another special guest. I usually stand up for special guests, but I feel like sitting down today. I usually stand up, Jeb, but I'm sitting down. We have a special guest. So he's a seasoned community leader, an advocate for affordable housing and community-driven commercial development, intending to empower communities with resources and information that encourage growth and upward mobility. For more than 20 years, he's been a community leader here in the Charlotte area. His resume is so long. I just want to list a couple of things. Founder of Community Dream Builders Incorporated, leads eFix Development Corps. Says he loves cameras. He might be on a TV screen near you. A reality show? Is this a reality show?
It looks Damon Johns. I'm excited about
Damon Johns. We have Chris Dennis on the show. How you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing so great. Always a blessing to be in the house and talking to creative people about community, which I always love. So.
Oh man, can we announce HB? You said okay. You said
it's coming.
It's coming. Okay. We'll chill on that. I'm not going to ask you about that. I'm not going to ask you about that. You're from Sumter, South Carolina?
Yeah, from a little small town called Sumter, outside of Columbia. Everybody knows Sumter, but then I'm actually from a town called Rembert. It's a little small town, so if you know it, it's got one stoplight.
Yeah, I got, I think, one Wendy's in Sumter.
We don't got no Wendy's this time.
I used to work in Florence, so I used to pass through Sumter to get to my brother's place in Somerville.
I lived in Florence for about 5 years. I worked at the GE medical plant right across from Magnolia Mall, I think it was. So.
That mall still stands, man. You know they got that Chinese spot in the mall.
Oh, you been there too?
What? What? That Chinese spot in the mall where they put all the rice, all the noodles, everything. Like you can barely close the styrofoam
right there
plate.
Right there.
Your earliest memories, like growing up in South Carolina.
Wow, man. So my story is very unique, and I always tell people, life is always about a journey. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I think of my earliest memories, I always think back to my beginning. I was one of those kids that was born with a learning disability. Mm-hmm. They said I never learned past 7th grade, so they put me in a resource class. And for 6 years of my life, I spent in a single class staring at a wall trying to figure out how to think outside the box. And 3 words changed my life, and that was the words, I believe in you. Mm-hmm. And between teacher and Greek parents, I was able to graduate top of my class. So my earlier memories always start off with thinking where that journey started from and what has made me into who I am today and why I fight so hard for communities. So that resource class, but it's not I always tell people it's not a crutch, it was a launch pad, and that was one of my defining moments.
Who said I believe in you first? Was it teacher or parents?
Man, it was my grandma.
Grandmother, okay.
I never forget, I was sitting behind a door. If you remember, your grandma always had that metal cabinet, and I was sitting behind a door and I was banging my head side to side. And now I know that was a coping mechanism. I was taught that. But my grandma opened the door and said, today you define that dent, or that dent will define you. And she said, I believe in you. And that changed my life. And that put me on the path of knowing that I could do anything.
Man, who did you look up to growing up?
Wow, I had my first hero, man. I always tell people I stand on the shoulders of giants. My father's the first person I looked up to. He worked night shift and made sure that every night he came home and made sure I got my work done. He said, you're not going to be in this resource class, so he fought for that. And he was always that guy who was hard, but then at the same time he showed compassion. But the one thing I'll say is, in that memory, like most fathers, he worked hard, but for me, the reason why he's my hero, my father didn't tell me he loved me until I went into the military. And I literally I was getting on the plane and had to almost stop in tears and turn back and be like, what'd you say? But love is a word that you say, but all my life he showed me the actions of love. But that one time he said it, it just kind of broke me down. So he's my hero ever since.
I feel like as black men, I didn't hear that from my grandfather. It's hard for us as men, as black men, to say that. Like, we always say, like, you lead by example. Sometimes those words, man, they mean a lot, man.
Well, I think that's the key thing. I think, back in those days, I think it was, let me show you how much I love you versus and saying it. But, nowadays things have shifted a little bit. I try to tell myself every day, I love you. I love you. So,
what earliest memories of your father? Like, what sticks out when you think about your father?
The fact that every day he got up and went to work. He was always going to work. And then he was always big about communities. We had cookouts, man. I'd say when I grew up, we had 300 people in our front yard. I'm like, Dad, who are all these people? And what are they here for? And so it was like a big family. Every time we had a gather, it was always cookout. He was always on the grill and always trying to bring people together. And I think that's where I got my sense of community from. Just watching how my family really pulled people together and got them on the front lawn. And it wasn't always for a mission, it was just for family. And we always had that one tree where Grandma sat around and everyone clamored around it. So my earliest memories of my father was, man, behind that grill, going to work and showing us that he loves us and never making us feel like we didn't have anything. Because back then, I'd say we were poor, but I never saw it. So
22 years in the Air Force?
Oh, man.
What made you go in the military?
Well, I had a lot of brothers and sisters, and I made a commitment early on that I told my dad when I was young that he had put my sister was the first one in my family to go to college, and so I wanted to go to college, but things were tight, so I told my father that I'd make a way. Don't worry about me. I'm the oldest boy, so I'll make a way, and I ended up going into the military. It was a bittersweet thing, and I knew going in I wanted to go in the military, but I didn't know what the commitment meant. But the military taught me so much when it came to understanding patriotism and then service before self. And that just changed my life about the commitment and taught me how to travel and see the world. So it was one of the best things I'd say I ever done. Well, I always tell people it's the best, worst mistake I ever made.
You got to explain that one. You can't just leave that one. You got to explain that one.
Man, I tell you, getting up and ended up going in and had a great career, ran the communication shop, got a chance to fly in one of the fastest planes on the planet, F-16. That was one of my greatest experiences. But at the same time, for me, being in the military and then going into the guard, being in the guard and working at the Bank of America for 13 years, doing that simultaneously while raising a son became a lot. And the bittersweet of it, you have to kind of juggle between time management and resources. And so I had a lot of resources but no time.
Yeah.
And so it played a big part in family structure and life. But I plowed through it, and I think that gave me a lot of resilience. But the biggest thing for the military was I learned what patriotism was, and I learned what the values of doing the right thing and trying to do the right thing, and I saw that wholeheartedly.
So you got your, obviously I did some research on you, your MBA from Queen's University. Is that how you made your way here to Charlotte, or is that?
No, actually, being honest, I was in Florence, man. I was in Florence, South Carolina, and I wanted to be I really wanted to be an engineer. But what happened was I didn't have the opportunity to become a full-fledged engineer. They wanted someone in Charlotte that could do engineering and computers, so I migrated to Charlotte. And when I did that, I got into banking after getting my first job in Charlotte at Caverno Poping. Got into banking, started doing that. But when I was at Bank of America, I was having an impact and met a lady named Nancy Vanellis at the Leadership Charlotte. Went on Queen's University campus, said I wanted to go here. Lo and behold, she took me to a classroom, and next thing you know, I'm getting my MBA.
And just like that.
It happened just like that. And the crazy thing was, 2 years after getting my MBA, I actually left Bank of America. So I don't tell anybody. Don't get your MBA and quit your job. But it was a blessing for me, so it worked out.
Chris Dennis here. Look, we got more with Chris Dennis. We need to pay the bills. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back here in just a few here on 704 Unfiltered. All right, welcome back here, 704 Unfiltered. We have Chris Dennis. All right, so we were talking about the beginnings. Valuable lesson here. Don't get your MBA if you plan on quitting your job. What makes Charlotte unique? Because you got involved, and I guess what made you get involved in the community aspect? Because, I mean, you've done so much in the community, and it's one thing to say, hey, I want to see change, I want to make an impact. It's another thing to actually do it, right?
Well, I'll say I was at Bank of America for 13 years, man. I sat at Bank of America, and I led the trading floor for B of A for 13 years. And I was in a cubicle, and I realized that I was making an impact, but I wasn't having an impact. And when I say that, I really want to be clear because I was doing my job, and I loved the leadership opportunities Bank of America gave me. I was around solid leaders. I learned the strategic and tactical skills from the military, but I was in that cubicle. And I never forget one day at Bank of America, my leaders came from other cities, Chicago, New York, and Atlanta, to come and visit me in Charlotte. And when they did that, there was an accident on 85. They drove down 85 and came through a little neighborhood called Lockwood. Now, I had just moved to Lockwood back then, and Lockwood at that time what had been labeled and it was in the news, the top 25 most dangerous neighborhood to live in America. That's an actual article. I didn't make that up. But when they got to the office, they told me the story about how the taxi driver drove through that neighborhood and told them to move into the center of the seats because the crime was so bad. And they came from New York, Atlanta, and Charlotte, and they couldn't believe what they saw. And they asked me a crazy question. They said, so Chris, in the icebreaker, so Chris, where do you live? Now, I stood there for a second, and I realized that either I could tell them the truth or I could tell them a lie. I could say, hey, look, I still live in University. It's a big old house, and it's quiet. It's a beautiful community, and I don't know the community you're talking about. But I had just moved to Lockwood, and when I said that, something inside of me broke and said, I got to get out of the we mentality. We talk about doing things, but I can make something happen. And that day, honestly, was a day that I really made up in my mind that I was going to dedicate a lot of my life to change communities, because there's no way someone's going to drive in a Charlotte community and say that community was so bad that they were so afraid that they had to slide into their seats. And I said I committed that, I would do what I can to change Lockwood. And I was in the process of getting my MBA at Queens, and my professor asked me to come to the board and draw a X and Y axis, or figure out how I could take a community model and turn it into a business and make sense. And I said, I could do this. I'm very smart. I can do this. I can take an X and Y axis and really show you how community and business can work together. I said, but I got to change the formula a little bit. Instead of just an X and Y axis, I need to draw a separate line, and that line would mean people. So if I take the X and Y axis, put time and build resources on top of that, but if I built the people on that axis as an opposite line, I could create something that's powerful. And my professor said, you're on to something. And that was the day that I said I was going to leave Bank of America, and I started a company called eFix. And eFix's whole mission was to go in and impactfully drive change in communities and using housing to do it. And so with that, I started the nonprofit, which was Community Dream Builders, and they kind of commingled. They coexisted together to kind of really bring home the thought process of how housing and the nonprofit could work together to stabilize a small community, and it worked.
What did the 5K come in? I gotta ask that. I know it's a random thing, but I mean, it's when you hear 5K, when you hear any sort of event, I mean, obviously, folks are competitive, they want to run, but it's about bringing community together.
Man,
yeah.
So I told you I came from a resource class, so I think a little bit different. But I'm being honest, man. The 5K was the pendulum that actually, when you think about the Camp North End or the Music Factory, the 5K was the catalyst. But at that time when the 5K was started because the neighborhood was labeled as the top 25 most dangerous neighborhood living in America. But I knew right then we had to change that stigmata, because if we didn't change the stigmata, people would treat that neighborhood that way and everyone in it. So I had a crazy idea. I said, hey, look, why not do a 5K in this predominantly Afro-American community, 98% Afro-Americans, 1% Caucasian. But I said, here's what I think I can do. Let me take a 5K, turn it into a rock band 5K, call it the NC Music Factory 5K, start it at the Music Factory, go out and find the loudest rock band concert in the bands I could find, and spend 3 months choosing the right band. I spent 3 months in the back of vans and garages listening to rock bands who could bring really good fire. And so that was the premise. We took we took bands and placed them out throughout the community. They had to have a lot of energy, had a big concert at the Music Factory, wrapped a 5K around it, and used the funds to rebuild a community. We did it for 5 years straight. It was one of the third largest 5Ks in Charlotte, and I think it put the NC Music Factory on the map. And then it brought a lot of emphasis to Camp North End. Ave Exchange was one of our biggest sponsors, but it really did something that was phenomenal. It got people in the communities to really come out and see the value of their homes, but then also let people coming through the community see the value that the neighborhood they said was so dangerous wasn't dangerous at all. Because when we got to the Music Factory, we did one simple thing. We asked them, what'd you think about the route? They said they loved it. And they said, what'd you think about the community? Oh man, it was a beautiful community.
Yeah.
The mind shift changed. And my slogan was, the hood is state of mind, community is a way of life. And that day with that 5K, we gave the community an opportunity to be considered a community and not the hood. So it worked.
They're not driving through it, and they're not taking it in through TV. They're walking, they're running through it. So they're taking it in slowly.
Yeah, it became a full family experience. If you, the whole event was we had people getting married at the 5K, bringing their kids, doing dog walks, and now it's when you ride through Lockwood today, what we saw back then. What we see today is what we were envisioning back then, and I think that's the key part of being a visionary, and then also understanding how to drive impact in the community. But it was a community effort. Everybody pitched in, the community pitched in, and for 10 years it went on. We ended it right after COVID.
Well, how did you get involved in the West End, and how did that start?
Wow. So after doing a lot of work in the North End side, I ended up looking at some housing on Beatty'sford Road. And I'll tell you, my passion, again, has always been around creating workforce housing. I understand that the need for affordable housing, which is a different model, but I really focused on affordable on the workforce housing. And I ended up buying a few houses on the West End and doing the same thing, and had a great run of going in and giving people opportunities and creating some home ownership opportunities, but also stabilizing the community. And I was doing that in the back of the community one day, and a friend of mine came over and asked me, "Hey, you ever thought about getting into commercial?" Now, remember, I had just prayed. I think I prayed about 6 months prior. I asked God to get me into commercial. I wanted to see what commercial was like. And if you ever ask God for something, I promise you, He'll answer you. And so when she asked me that, her name was Jatanya, and she said, "Hey, look, you ever thought about getting a commercial?" I said, I thought about it. What do you have? And she said, "There's a building on the corner of Beatty'sford Road, 2023 Beatty'sford Road." And I was like, wait a minute, on the corner of Beatty'sford and LaSalle? I said, wait a minute, there was just 5 months ago, there was just an incident where 5 people lost their lives, and that building is like dilapidated, and it's got some drug problems. I said, "Is that what you were going to buy? Look at?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, I thought about what God had did in my life all those years prior, and I said, you know what? If someone can believe in me, I can believe in that building. I can believe in those corners, and I believe I can make a difference. Funny story, I ended up getting in the contract. That I think within 2 days of that conversation, 2 or 3 days after that conversation, and I looked across the street, and at the same time saw Crystal Village, which was abandoned as well, and put that in a contract. Now, think about this for a second. I had never seen anyone like me own a commercial building. I had never seen blueprints for a commercial building, and I had never done financing for a commercial building. But God gave me 2 buildings that eventually now has 2 banks in them, and led through private-public partnerships with the city, the Coors Opportunity. And so we brought Chase Bank on one corner and TD Bank on the other.
Wow.
So I tell everybody, the joke for me is God took me out of one bank and gave me 2.
What have you learned about yourself with this? You're talking about you work in the North End, you work in the West End. What have you learned about yourself?
About myself, I've learned that that the power of what you can become starts in your mind, and I've learned that if you never give up, you never fail, because you're always pushing towards a goal. And I've also learned about myself that it takes a team of people to make things happen. And those the same words that my grandmother and my father instilled in me early on, that I believe in you, resonates in everything that I do. And that goes from me talking to a CEO to a homeless person on the street. My first words, I believe in you. And if I can instill that mindset in you, we can change anything.
Let's take a quick break. I got more questions for our guy, Chris Dennis. We'll be back here in just a few minutes. All right, welcome back here on 704 Unfiltered. I'm with our guy, Chris Dennis. So we were talking about, just your work over the years in North End, West End, man. It's an exciting thing you got going on. Real Estate and Roast at Archive CLT. This is weekly, right?
Man, it started off weekly.
Okay,
It was a lot.
I was about to say.
But the framework of the Real Estate and Roast was unique because I was at Archive. Archive is a coffee shop that's in the Chase Bank building. And Archive has become a center of community engagement, interactions. It's more than just a coffee shop. But we sat there with 4 people and had a conversation, and the conversation started off around the fact that in that community, in most marginalized communities, there are investors that come in, and particularly in the West End, there was an investor, 3 individuals who were looking to invest $26 million in Charlotte. And they had a mission that they wanted to be very targeted and specific. So they said, well, I want to come to Charlotte and invest $26 million, but then we want to invest it in a particular zip code. So they looked across Charlotte and saw 28216. Well, that was Beatty'sford Road. Then they said, well, let's be a little bit more specific because we want to invest in housing that started from 150 to 300,000. Well, that's all of your first-time homebuyer housing. And I asked those 4 people that were sitting at that table that day, I said, let me ask you a question. Did you guys hear about this investment firm and what they're doing, an individual that will invest in this type of money? Because they had $26 million. After a 10% return on investment, they would go raise a fund to $100 million and come back and do even more. And I said, hey, did you hear anything about this? And they said, no. I said, well, the funny thing is that conversation didn't happen that day. It happened almost a year prior. And to this day, right now, as we sit, that conversation was about 3 years old. The premise of the real estate and roast was, how do we get people engaged to understand how development is happening, how to be intentional about getting engaged in that development, and then how to execute and become part of the change, help drive the change versus being moved by the change. And we did that based on 3 pillars: community, investment, and economics. And so with those 3 pillars, we were able to take the real estate and roast, a group of individuals, give them the basic understandings of education around finance, but really coach them around how economics work when it comes to community, and then how to be intentional about how we invest in our communities to rebuild them. And it worked. So we went from being not every other, it was every Friday.
That's a big commitment.
It was a lot of commitment. So now we do it every other Friday.
Okay.
But that room went from 4 people to 55 people.
55 people.
The only cost of that to attend that event on Friday mornings at 7 a.m. was a cup of coffee. At Archive Coffee Shop, we did 50 cups of coffee every single Friday. Now it's every other Friday, and it changed the dynamics. And we even got to a point now where we've outgrown that space, and we recently moved to John C. Smith. So we're doing a unique partnership with John C. Smith to not only change the model a little bit, but engage our youth and help them understand a whole template program where we'll eventually create a curriculum on how to invest in our communities and be intentional about it. But the Real Estate Roast is I think it's one of the hottest group meetings at 7 a.m. on a Friday morning.
On a Friday morning, get a good cup of coffee.
Yes.
At that. Real quick before I let you go, what's next?
Man, so for me, it's creating opportunities for individuals to be intentional about their communities, and we're doing a huge dedication right now on legacy. So we're doing a presentation where we're actually taking 2023 Batesville Road and dedicating it to Mr. McDonald, the old McDonald's cafeteria. We're bringing back the conversation about how he created the legacy that started. Like I said before, we stand on the shoulders of giants. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, and I want to make sure that we tell the story. So that building is now is a historic designation because of Mr. McDonald, and we're doing a documentary to show his impact on that corner and why that building was restored versus torn down. So right now, my biggest project now is talking about legacy, man, and building legacy.
Man, you do incredible work, man. I've heard so much about you. It was glad to finally meet you, to have you on the show. I told him he made our show official, man. You see the logo
These
on the back,
graphics,
man.
I'm loving it.
Come on, man. Welcome back to the neighborhood. You feel free to come back to the neighborhood, I should say. And when you come back, I'll say welcome back to the neighborhood. I call this the neighborhood.
Wow.
So thank you for stopping by, 704 Unfiltered. Man, I'm not even going to put your email and your number out there because you're going to have people blowing you up. So you can find Chris. He's an easy guy to get in contact with.
Find me at IG at Dream Bigger Institute. See what we're doing, chime in. Also, my personal IG is the THE Christopher Dennis, but either one of those, you can keep me on IG. See what we're doing. And really, I tell people, whatever you do, the West End is a community that we need to invest in. And so come see the West End, see what Base Road looks like, and see the things that we're doing there. But get engaged. I challenge everyone. Get rid of the we mentality and go to the I mentality, because you can change our communities.
All right, Chris Dennis, thank you again for stopping in. And that's it for us, 704 Unfiltered. We do this show weekly. We highlight Black voices. Make sure you tap in with us. Great conversation. We'll see you next week.